All right, let's just zoom in on one single day, April 2nd, 2026. What's so special about it? Well, it's a day when the world felt like it was being pulled in two totally different directions at once. You've got major stories of conflict, high-stakes politics, and, believe it or not, incredible human achievement, all happening at the exact same time.
So, the day's biggest headline, the one that got everyone talking, came from this primetime address by President Trump. He says the U.S.'s core strategic objectives in Iran are, and I quote, nearing completion. Now, that sounds like an endgame, right? But with no timeline, no specifics, it just left the entire world holding its breath, wondering what completion was actually going to look like.
Well, it didn't take very long to find out. What that statement meant on the ground was a sudden and pretty violent escalation. Let's break down exactly how this whole situation just exploded into a regional firestorm.
And this is where you see the sheer coordination of it all. At pretty much the same time, you've got U.S. and Israeli forces hitting this absolutely critical military bridge that connects Tehran and Karaj, and then, almost simultaneously, all the way from Yemen, Houthi rebels, working with Iran and Hezbollah, launched this barrage of ballistic missiles straight at Israel. I mean, this was no small skirmish. This was a highly organized, multi-front attack.
And, a conflict on this scale never, ever happens in a bubble, especially not in the Middle East. The economic shock waves were immediate, and they were felt literally everywhere.
This was the number that just jolted global markets, $110. Suddenly, that was the new price for a single barrel of U.S. crude oil. It's a staggering figure that, all on its own, tells you a story of global panic.
And this chart just perfectly illustrates that panic. I mean, look at that jump, over 11% for U.S. crude. Brent crude, which is the international standard, it shot right past $109. This is the kind of volatility that can send entire economies spiraling into recession. It is a huge deal.
So how did the rest of the world react? Well, basically, with a deeply fractured voice. You've got the UN Security Council scrambling to try and protect commercial shipping. Over in the UK, they host a massive crisis summit, but there's a really notable absence, the United States. Meanwhile, Iran just shuts down the vital Strait of Hormuz to most countries. And then, in a move that shows you all the geopolitical chess pieces, Russia claims its own ships can still pass through just fine. It's a perfect picture of a world completely out of sync.
So while the whole world is grappling with this crisis abroad, a completely different kind of turmoil was kicking off in Washington, D.C. It really seemed like all that international pressure was triggering some major power plays right inside the administration's inner circle.
And then, bam, a sudden cabinet shakeup. Attorney General Pam Bondi was fired, and in her place, Todd Blanche, who happens to be one of the president's personal lawyers, was immediately named as her acting successor. That's a huge and pretty unusual move, especially to make in the middle of a massive international crisis.
And this wasn't just some isolated thing. Nope. Over at the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reportedly asked the Army Chief of Staff to resign. So this wasn't just one change, it was a much wider leadership overhaul, and it was happening at the very highest levels of U.S. power, right in the thick of a global emergency.
But what if, on this day that was so defined by all the conflict here on Earth, what if the biggest story wasn't about us looking at each other, but about us looking up?
Because at the exact same time all this chaos was unfolding, something truly historic was happening hundreds of thousands of miles above the planet. A story of unity, of courage, and of pure exploration.
For the first time in over half a century, humans were on their way back to the moon. The Artemis II mission, with its international crew, had this picture-perfect launch, entered orbit, and was now firing its engines, starting that long, incredible journey. What an amazing counterpoint to everything else that was happening back on Earth that day.
And of course, these weren't the only stories. The world is a big place. Life, in all its complexity and its tragedy, just kept going. Let's take a quick look at some of the other major events that shaped this single day.
In Indonesia, a massive 7.4 magnitude earthquake caused just widespread damage. In Sudan, a horrific drone strike hit a hospital, killing civilians and medics. And then in the Netherlands, you have this moment of triumph as a priceless stolen ancient helmet was recovered by authorities. So you have tragedy, war, and justice all happening at once.
And as the day finally came to a close, one more global event happened, one that was visible to almost everyone. The April pink moon reached its full phase. It's the celestial marker of spring that people all over the world could just look up and see, together.
So you have it all,
Conflict and exploration, tragedy and diplomacy, all unfolding in the same 24 hours. It just goes to show you, one planet on one single day can hold all of these infinite contradictory stories. So the question it really leaves you with is, which one of those stories truly defines who we are?